All right. All right. Well, obviously, thank you everybody for joining us. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot of great content out of all the workshops, everything that's happened so far. People are dropping off of here, making sure I'm doing this right. You hear me all right, Richard?
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying, I think I see a countdown.
I don't see a countdown.
Yeah, I see a countdown as well. You get 30 seconds.
All right, good. I don't see a countdown though.
Keeps muting me too. Maybe that's a hint. 14 seconds, Michael. We can count you down.
Give me a thumbs up. I'll kick it off.
The fact that you don't see it makes me a little nervous, but we'll roll with it. 3 seconds. 2, 1. There you go. You're on. You're on mute. You may be on mute, Michael.
I don't know why it keeps muting me.
are.
I'm not touching any buttons. I promise. I'm not touching any buttons. It keeps muting me. Maybe I'm already talking too much. I'm just the moderator. So obviously, thank you everybody for joining. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot out of the workshop so far. This will be a really good one because it's really one of the biggest questions that I get asked all the time from other vendors in the space is, what are you doing to make folks make it easy for people to do business with you, right? So we got a great panel here. I want to just so we get enough time to get everything in, we'll just go around and quickly have everybody introduce themselves. So I'll start with you, Nick, if you want to give a quick introduction, and we'll go around the horn.
Sure. Thanks, everybody, for attending. This is Nick Tidd. I'm with HP. I'm part of the Global Channel Organization. Been doing this for a long time. Probably know a lot of the folks that are attending the session, and happy to be able to share some feedback with you all.
Awesome. Welcome, Nick. Rachel?
Hey everybody, Rachel Tuller coming to you live from Raleigh, North Carolina today. Most recently with Cloudera, leading channel partner program, sales, ops, everything, and been with a few companies before that. So keeping it simple is my theme that we're going to talk to today.
Awesome. Richard?
Yeah, I'm Richard Flynn. I'm one of the partners and the CMO of the Spur Group. Some of you may not be completely familiar with us. We focus on providing support and services for many of the folks that are either yourself or on the phone.
Perfect. And Cosmo?
And I'll take us to the end here. Cosmo Mariano, the Chief Customer Officer at Zift Solutions. I work with a lot of clients and get to peer into a lot of data and how programs are working. So hopefully I can bring some of that insight to the table today.
All right, perfect. And then I'm Mike DePalma, Vice President of Business Development at Kaseya. Been in the channel close to 10 years now, focusing exclusively on MSPs, but obviously looking for all the different go-to-market opportunities that are out there. So, well, let's just start off kind of defining the topic, because I think it is when you ask a bunch of people, what does it mean to make it easier for folks to do business with you? There's part of it being as simple as like, how do people buy stuff from you, right? Some days, what kind of enablement tools? What does my support look like? So why don't we start there? I guess I'll start with you, Rachel. I mean, what would be the one thing you'd want to highlight when you're trying to define what it means to be easy to do business with? Where would you start?
So the one thing we started with was, let's make sure that partners understand how to make money with us in the most easiest, simplest way, because they're coin operated just like the rest of us. And as long as we can show them on a slide, not a spreadsheet, how to make money, I think that's probably the number one tenet.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Cosmo, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I'm going to build on that idea because, I see it from the platform perspective, coming from a portal PRM platform where, this feeds into really understanding what your partners need to do to make money, understand their business so that then you can tailor your activities to support them. Whether it's campaigns or enablement content or incentives. It's just about making sure that you're aligning your activities to your various partner segments.
Yeah, that's a good point. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I'd like to build on Cosmo's point and to Rachel, building a plan. You're all going to have the problem of the day. One of your senior executives is going to talk to a partner, and that's going to be your next issue. And so I would encourage you to have a roadmap. And achieving a roadmap is not as tough as you think it is. And what I often subscribe to and have done for years is a concept called start, stop, continue. And it's a very simple exercise. Ask your partners to give you the 5 things they want you to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. But don't let it be a laundry list. Let them vote on it. That way you can hone in on those issues that are impeding growth, presenting growth opportunities, or something may just simply be working, and don't break it. So many times I see people with Excel sheets, project files, templates, KPIs. Oh my gosh, I could go on forever and ever about all the tools, but it's just very simple. Use the framework, but report back on the framework. Use that as your pulse. Use it internally and externally, because internally, you're going to be able to get them to be aligned with you. Externally, it's the number one thing you need is your partners in your back pocket with you. And so if you let them vote, guess what? They form your plan. Then you can go back to them and say, hey, Mr. Flynn, do you remember when I asked you about your top 5 priorities? And you said this. Oh, yeah, now I remember. So get them involved, do it often, and do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that point. And I think sometimes you make assumptions as to what you think it means, like what the definition of this means. But you got to get that input from the client base or from prospects that don't want to do business with you. Why didn't you do business with me? Well, it's because of these barriers. And I think sometimes we live in our bubbles, and there's the think tank at the corporate level where this is what people want. But I think you're right, Nick. It could be that simple as just asking the questions and then putting pen to paper and trying to execute on that. Richard, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that it's tough being the last one because you always want to do something different than what's been previously said. I think all those things that were previously said are great. I think the only things that I would add is it's a game of information and communication too. Quite often, what's confusing matters and making things different is that different people have siloed information and they're not sharing it back and forth between people. So, the partner or your organization is constantly having different conversations around the same topic, or your communications aren't done in a way that sets a great expectation and then communicates how you're delivering against that expectation, admitting the shortcomings that you might be having against that expectation setting, and then gathering and recording the feedback that's coming back. And if you kind of wrap everything that we talked about, the how you make money and making sure that you're polling people to find out what's important for them, and you're sharing that information and you're communicating it, I think you're going to be in a much stronger position than you might be starting out in.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Michael, you're the moderator, but I have a question built on that. For all of these 3, actually, do you have a practical approach to getting the various teams together, whether it's marketing and sales teams or operations teams, to collect that insight and build it together into a cohesive program?
So I can certainly, because I'm watching the chat, and I've had a few of the folks that have been with me for a few years going, hey, I remember when we used to do that. Talk about consistency. Consistency is going to be key. And so you can use it in a QBR. You can use it in a roadshow. Generally, I like to use it whenever I've got a gathering. It can also be done virtually. Now, it's a little bit trickier to do it virtually because you're asking them to vote. So you're going to have to change your nuance. But it also, and I wanted to go back to something that Richard built on in practicality, to Cosmo's point, is this can help you folks build your budgets as well. This can help you report out on your budgets. This can also help you in the effectiveness of your tools, right? Because we all as larger vendors, some of us gravitate towards NPS, Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score simply is, are you going to recommend me? It doesn't get into the weeds. but you don't necessarily want to get that far into the weeds, is you want the topical points. And then, as I said at the beginning, you have to be consistent. And you have to go back to the partner and say, look, this is what you told me the last time. How have I done? And it then becomes a progressive scorecard graduating, because guess what? You can start to knock off some of those ease of doing business, because everybody likes to talk about ease of doing business, but it's a catch-all. So you got to net it down. And as some of us who are avid golfers, right, there's a term in golf called drive for show, putt for dough, right? And if you can get the short putts to go in, you're going to knock off your list. You want to go and hit the big drive, and you want to try to, you're not going to be consistent. So work on a framework, compartmentalize it, and then you can also break it out within your own org as a reporting card, and then you become the conduit internally and externally.
Nick, I'm going to build on that. I think one thing that we often forget is engaging the other parts of the business, right? I'm doing everything I can in partner programs and partner marketing, but all of a sudden sales ops comes in from the left, or support comes in from the right, and they don't have the same philosophy that I do when it comes to how to treat partners. And so getting that alignment internally within the organization and taking that framework and sharing it out, being the internal evangelist, is definitely the key to that great partner experience.
Yeah.
Because how many times we hear about parts of the org that don't understand channels still? And
that's a key thing. I mean, one of the things that I love about the channel space is I think you can make an argument that it's the most matrix part of any organization.
Right.
You know, it deals with marketing, it deals with sales, it deals with each of your products. It has a customer facing component to it. It has a partner facing component to it. And almost all of those parts of the organization, partners are a secondary thought, you know? And so to the point that both Nick and Rachel were making, you have to advocate. You have to be the master of that 30-second elevator pitch. You need to have a consistent scorecard that, you know, maybe only has 5 metrics on it that are agreed to and that you're reporting on. You probably need to be able to drill down deeper, you know, for specific people, but you need to have that dashboard or that scorecard that's very quick and easy for you to talk to and for you to share about. And you need to be able to recognize that you're probably going to have to repeat that same story every time, every conversation, that the first 30 seconds of every pitch is going to, or every conversation is going to be, as you remembered, these were our goals. This is what we're trying to drive. This is our priority. And that's just a habit that you're going to need to get yourself into, because nobody else really is living and breathing this thing across the expanse of what you're doing in the same manner as you are.
Yeah.
And here's another tip and trick for you folks. How many of you get these flaming emails after your CEO, your CRO has been out to a partner, and it was the last thing they heard, and they think that's the most pressing issue?
Yeah.
You can very eloquently go back to them and say, hey, I understand that. Here's the view I'm seeing from the entire channel. And oh, by the way, it falls into this matrix. Or it could be something completely out of left field. And you could say, well, boss, I hear you, but that's not the consistent theme I'm hearing from the channel. Perhaps maybe I can take that as a one-off. So it allows you to set the expectation and remind folks of what's critical to the majority of your partners. And it will also serve as a check and balance for you as well, so that you're not constantly chasing those fire drill emails based on the last conversation.
Yeah. And another tip I'm going to build on that with is try to uncover problems. People love to talk about their problems. They'll tell you, they know what hurts them. You know, what's the way we're ask them, are we treating you the way you want to be treated? What hurdles are we creating for you? They'll tell you all day long as you collect that information. You don't have to ask your partners for solutions. That's your job. You can, if you can collect the list of grievances, if you want to call them, or hurdles, you can take that back, prioritize. There's that roadmap Nick and Rachel were talking about. And then you can be the voice of the partner for your organization right, for the rest of this piece that was just spoken about.
Yeah, I want to kind of expand a little bit on what both Nick and Rachel said. To your point, Nick, everybody's been in that email thread where all of a sudden the sky is falling because one partner is so angry about something. Yeah. So to your very first point about creating that framework and having a system, to be able to have that at your fingertips, and when that CEO sends an email to be like, nope, remember, this is our full structure. This could be a one-off issue, or maybe that client's not understanding it. But what you mentioned, Rachel, about getting the buy-in from the other departments, I think that's one of the things that kind of goes overlooked in terms of, you know, conveying all of these decisions and what this framework looks like to all the different departments that might be, you know, involved. But my question to you guys is, what's your avenue for those departments to express their ideas? Like, you know, account managers are at the ground level. They might be hearing that feedback that maybe somebody doesn't want to say to an executive, but will tell their account manager. Maybe the billing team is having consistent issues. What is the avenue that you could put in place so that there is that, hey, we're all on the same team here. I'm willing to listen to your feedback, Mr. Account Manager, Mr. Billing Specialist, Mr. Support, Tech Support, whatever it is, to make sure that that voice is being listened to as well. I'll start with you, Rachel.
So we used to have a weekly roundup, and I would have all my stakeholders, you know, on a Monday. Well, we got to every other Monday, but we would just get together and just say, hey, what are you hearing, right? And just ask them and start to document. And we had somebody responsible for capturing it all and documenting it. And we would go through. And then if we had to follow up, you know, typically we had the field leaders or the support leaders that they're hearing from their teams, and they had to ask their teams and come to the meeting with information. So, you know, we could then follow up if we needed to, or, you know, drill down, is it a specific partner that's happening, a specific region, right? And understand where the issues were. But just having, I think, Richard, you said it, the ongoing communication and making it a safe place where nobody was pointing fingers at each other. It was like, here's the issue. Now we're going to try and figure it out.
So let me build on first on the safe place comment. One of the things I would encourage you to do is, if you want honest feedback and you happen to be doing this face to face, have all of your team leave the room. Let partners do it themselves, let them rate it, and then you come back. Then with respect to, and Richard said it earlier, many of us are in matrix organizations. And the challenge in a matrix organization, and something I always strive for, is have the recipient believe it's their idea. If you can have them believe it's their idea, i.e. that magic moment, that light bulb goes off, guess what? They're going to have some ownership back in that. And so put together a matrix. I don't necessarily think it needs to be every week, unless you've got some burning war room, and then they typically go to war room. But do it on a monthly or every 2 months. But also politely call out the people that don't show up. Because if you publicly humiliate them, and then they say, well, I didn't hear your voice because you didn't send somebody, right? And so it's guilt by shame. It is association to the activity, and have them believe that the idea is theirs. And then you're going to have to filter them, because you're not going to be able to do everything. The French like to do something different than the British. The British like to do something different than the US. California doesn't like to do what Texas does. And so you're going to have to deal with multiple personalities for those of you that are in global roles. But getting them to commit to the exercise, and then your commitment has to be the follow-up.
And, you know, we do many engagements. We probably do, you know, hundreds of engagements with 50 different vendors a year. And I would say that the common thread of what projects are successful and what projects, let's say, are perhaps less than successful is this change management communications effort. And, you know, everybody thinks about it when you're doing some huge transformation. We're going to generate the next generation of our partner program or something along those lines. But you can scale down what that, you know, steering committee, you know, council looks like, depending on where you are in the organization and the things that you're trying to change. So all of us have different stakeholders. And, you know, it sounds a little silly on one level, but depending on the project, we will sometimes even maintain a, for our eyes only, stakeholder roadmap where we score people as red, yellow, green. Green is these guys are evangelists. They're pushing the same point of view. We've got good buy-in. Red are, these people are adversarial. They don't seem to get the vision. They don't seem to really understand what's going on. And yellow, I would say, are perhaps the toughest ones. Those are the passive aggressives. Those are the ones that sign up and say, yeah, we're all there, but then they don't show up to the meeting, or they don't, do their part. And then you can manage who it is that you're talking to and make sure that you have a structure, and maybe you're doing a one-on-one conversation with somebody, and doing that before the general meeting so that you can make sure that you understand their point of view and communicate it and build the empathy. And to Nick's point, have them help you make the decision. Take an embrace and extend, point of view. It's always a red flag for us when one of our clients says, well, when we ask, well, who are the decision makers here? And they say, I am. Because whenever that's the case, it quite often, unless they're the CEO, and even then they've got a board generally that they have to deal with, it's showing that they haven't built that stakeholder foundation to really support the decisions that are being made.
Hey, Michael, Jennifer's got a really good question that follows this topic. Her question is, how do you deal with following up, taking the feedback to senior leadership, and not being able to get support to make any changes that need to be made? So Jennifer, I'll give you my tips and tricks, is that you get your partners. So let's just say, for simple math, you have 5 partners that you've got in this forum. Get them to vote. And all 5 say, this is my number one thing I want you to stop doing. So now you have a consensus. Then weight the revenue or the need for them to be successful in your org. Then if you're going to get somebody that's just going to say, I don't believe it, set them up in one-on-ones. But typically a smart leader who's empowered his team, if you can speak to a group of versus a one-off, and you can speak to a consensus. Now, this may be my social pacifist Canadian upbringing where we get along with everybody, but you've got to bring everybody along with you in that journey. So if you can demonstrate that you've got the voice of the channel and that they won't listen to that, invite them to your next session. Now, I'm not suggesting that you throw them to the wolves, right? But prep them and create a forum for them to give you that feedback. Because if they're not listening, then you're taking them to the opportunity to hear it, you may want to think about going to work somewhere else, because you're not going to succeed as a channel leader if you've got that kind of a block. But smarter minds will prevail with consistency and content. And it's something many of us were taught a long time ago. If you're going to bring me a problem, bring me a solution. It may be A, B, or C, but bring the solution too. And that's how I get to move the needle.
And another thing that we do for most of our projects is make sure you have a decision log, and publish that as part of your status report or your outgoing thing, and say, these were the major decisions that were made. And then don't, avoid going back to rethink those decisions unless there's been a change of circumstance. I mean, if there's new data, we found that one of our assumptions was incorrect or something along those lines, of course, readdress it. But that way you also don't get mired down on things that were already decided, and you can move on and you can say, well, that was already, closed. Or if people have an issue with a decision that was made, you can say, hey, look, you've got, 2 weeks to respond back on these decisions that were made and voice your concerns or issues before we put it to bed and we continue to move on. So you're maintaining and driving a momentum, and you're not stalled on things that keep getting rehashed and rehashed and rehashed.
I love it.
I would
Cosmo.
I would
Go
just
ahead, your
double
thoughts?
down on what Nick said, but I would put a little slight spin on it and say that I think part of the challenge is making the stories or your partner's stories your decision maker's stories. So, Nick, we talked about getting that leader to come and meet those partners or listen to those stories. That's what you have to transfer. You got to find the right stories that are going to resonate with your leadership, be able to tell those from a voice of the channel perspective, and try to get those transferred, because those are the arguments they're going to use to make their decisions and to justify their decisions in the organization.
Yeah, and Richard, I love the documentation of, the decisions that were made, because I do think you'll get the same type of issues that might come up 12 months later from another forum that you're in, and to be able to go back and say, oh, we already debated this and we came up with this answer, and having that knowledge at your fingertips, I think is really critical. So that's why these exercises are good, even going forward. Rachel, you didn't get a chance to answer this one, but I did. I love this question from Jennifer. Any other thoughts on that, on how to bring this stuff up to the senior leadership and then following it through?
Not on top of what everybody else already said, so we can move on to the next one.
Move on.
And,
all right,
and
cool.
I remember once we were at a particularly dysfunctional organization. I won't name who they were, but we even went so far as had DocuSigns internally for people signing off on decisions. And that was actually at the behest of, actually somebody very high up in the C-suite, because they were tired of the muddling going on at the executive level. But, then to, again, Nick's point, you've got people on record as saying, look, we've done this, let's move forward.
And Michael, and I apologize to the team because I was just watching the time. I have to cut my time short with the group, but I just wanted to thank everybody. Folks, feel free to jump in on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy. You can see my gray hair and my age. I've been doing this for a while. Happy to help with anybody that got any general questions.
Yeah, Cosmo and I used to have that gray hair, but
I used to have that problem.
Giving it all.
Mike, one thing I was going to add on that, which actually might be a segue, is, Nick said something about making sure that we're empowered. And when you talk about making things simple and being able to make fixes, it helps if we empower our teams, right? And so this decision tree does not have to be so complex. Like, give our teams the latitude to make the changes they need to make it simple for the partners to work with us, right? And, some of them are going to be operational, some of them, financial, we're going to need certain approvals. But I think the more that we can empower our teams, the more that, we're able to get things done.
100% on that. Yeah. I don't know if Cosmo, you were jumping in.
No,
everybody's kind of froze on me. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there you are. So, yeah, I just was faking the freeze.
Oh, there you go. Well, we talk about getting the feedback from, our partners and getting that feedback and bringing it up and being an advocate for those folks, because we're trying to help with the ease of doing business. But to your point earlier, Richard, you go back and you look at, do some forensics and say, hey, we might have already debated this before and we came to a decision. What's the best way in that forum? And you could have all 5 of those people that are asking for one specific thing or highlighting something that they feel is a negative for you in terms of ease of doing business, and you've already debated that and there's a no there. How do you have that conversation with that forum and say, look, I really appreciate this feedback. We actually have already investigated this. It wasn't the right reason for X, Y, and Z. It's a difficult conversation, but I guess I'll start with you, Richard. How do you handle those situations where the customer's not always right?
Well, I think that what you have to get to is a place where you have to understand everything in life is degrees more than it is binary. And so when somebody says no, if you'll pardon the language, is that a hell no, absolutely no frickin' way? Or is that I can live with the decision even if I don't necessarily agree with it? And we're all, or at least most of us, are adults, and we should be able to have that conversation. And so, when there's a negative, or this is my most important issue, showing a little empathy and saying, well, I really understand that, if you were my only person who I had to satisfy in this room, I might have a different answer. But you heard, within this group, and you're the only one with that issue, or that's not a critical issue in terms of it being a deal breaker, or something along those lines. So I'm not dismissing the importance of it. I'm just saying it's not the priority right now because we have other things that we need to do. And again, that goes back to that communications. Most people generally will understand that. Now, there are always people who are a little irrational and say, I don't care what everybody else thinks. I'm selfish. It should be all my, all me.
Yeah.
But you're probably not going to satisfy that mindset anyway. So the juice is probably not worth the squeeze on that particular thing. So that would be the way that I think that we would tend to deal with that.
Yeah, I can build on that a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle on it. I think that what I see is that we don't go deep enough in understanding the differences in our partners. Segmentation, personas, and if we can, we can really understand who we should be doing business with. We can recruit those types of partners more readily. We can design our programs to be, they're not all that different. Not everybody's, a special snowflake in terms of what they need. You can find like type needs within those partner segments, and really just understanding who you should be doing business with, and then focusing on how you can support them. You're going to go much further just by doing servicing those segments well. And I think these will be more like outliers in terms of what you couldn't do.
Yeah, I get that sense as well. Those are good points. So I want to tap a little bit into the institutional knowledge of the folks on the panel. So when we talk about just ease of doing business in the channel segment, I mean, what are some of the common themes? If you were clean slate, right, Cosmo, if you were to say, all right, what are the common things that you've learned over your course of your career that you tend to move the needle with customers in terms of just straight ease of doing business?
Yeah, more recently, I used to be a lot more on the strategic side. Now being at Zift Solutions, I've got, we run a partner portal, right? That's our product. So I have a lot more technical perspective on that too. I think just strategically with all the things that we've been talking about, engagement is reciprocal, understand their needs, personalize your programs to them, get feedback, all the things we've talked about. And then of course, we didn't touch on it a lot in this panel, but use technology, and Richard can really weigh in on AI. We're doing a lot of work in AI. You're going to see it everywhere. I think that would just be the number one thing I would add on to all of those fundamentals right now.
Yeah, Rachel, you see any common themes? Okay.
Yeah, ease of doing business is really about three things. Can they navigate your complexity? Are you doing what you commit to doing? And are you being open and honest with information? And so you're keeping them informed. And if you do those three things, you keep them informed, you live up to your commitments, and you simplify the navigation that they have in dealing with you as a 10,000, 100,000 person organization. Partners will say, I've got a good experience. They're going to always have an issue here or there. Yes, it took me 5 weeks to get something shipped to me, or I had this problem and nobody could resolve it. But in the general scheme of things, if they feel that you inform them, that you live up to your commitment, and that they know where to go to get a problem solved, they'll be very forgiving of the tactical mistakes that happen along the way.
I think for me, Simon Sinek, right? It all starts with why. So understand why you're doing what you're doing, who's benefiting from it, right? Whether it's a partner portal, whether it's a partner program, whether it's a new incentive you're launching, right? Let's begin with why we're doing this, and let's make sure that it's the right reason for the partners. The other thing is to really understand that last mile, right? That's where things break down, right? We can have the best portal in the world, but if they can't log in, because the SSO is broken, oh my God, let me tell you about the issues we have, right? So it's always that last mile, whether it's technology, whether it's the feet on the street sitting in front of the partner, and they need to be armed and have the right information and enablement, but focus on that last mile. I think that's something that has really come clear to me over the last several years, and what I'm doing is how does it hit at the street level, not just sitting up here in the ivory tower.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of times we get, and I think, channel programs, they're super important. They're great. They're great to stand up on stage, but a lot of times it's the little things like that that really make the difference of how, and, to your earlier point, Richard, I think those were great points. The only thing I'll push back on is, as you grow, as you expand your team and your channel program, how do you implement the systems in place to make sure that they're repeatable, so that if Richard Flynn leaves, the next person that comes in will share that same thing? Because I feel like a lot of times people get tied to the person that they are working with. And I trust Richard. I know he's going to do it. But John Smith's going to come in when Richard leaves, and the whole thing is broken. How do you ensure that it's a repeatable process?
And this might be a controversial answer. I think that while people are the face, they shouldn't be the back end of what it is that you're trying to do. And so we don't have a PRM that, I'm not coming at it from that point of view. But if you don't have a PRM that kind of measures and manages that part and lets you put notes on what are conversations and have a single view of what's going on, you're in a world of hurt. And I mean, you see it all the time in surveys. You guys have a problem with your people, but not my person.
You're right.
And my person's great, but everybody else in the firm is horrible. And everybody kind of has that same, point of view. So what that actually is saying is that it's not actually the people that are the problem, it's the processes that are the problem. Right. And so, it's tough, but, look at your process and simplify them. The biggest thing that we see that vendors, the trap that vendors fall into is they want to measure activity rather than outcome. I was just having a conversation today with somebody who's looking at their incentive program, and they're like, well, at the corporate level, we want to manage what the regions are doing with their incentive program. And the question is, why? Bluntly, why? Why does it matter to you if they're doing X or Y? What's important is I'm giving you this many dollars and I'm expecting this level of return. And if you deliver that return and in your market, you want to do X instead of Y, as long as you're not breaking the law and keeping the rules and being fair, I shouldn't be micromanaging that from my other part of the organization. And that's where you get the breakdowns. Trust, empower, extend, embrace. Those are the things that you want to focus on.
Yeah. No, I think you hit it. I know we only got a couple minutes left, so I do want to make sure everybody gets a little time for parting thoughts. And we got 4 minutes left. I know we had a good question for Jennifer, but if anybody has a question, please feel free to drop it in. But let's just go around and parting thoughts. Anything you might not have been able to touch on, or if you were to take people listening in, one takeaway, Cosmo, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely resonating with me is the idea of just understanding your partners. That's the biggest one. And just hitting these, I think the theme that we saw today was accountability, both internally and externally. How do you make promises, keep your promises? And I'm just going to end with that, to be honest with you.
All right. Sounds good. Rachel?
I'm a big fan of Kaizen, which is the Japanese practice of continuous improvement. And So we might just come out with something that's MVP. That might be all we need. We might need a V1 or a V2, whether that be a sales process, whether that be a system that we're putting in place. But I think always tweaking, always looking to do better, right? Innovate and iterate is one of my kind of core tenets that I love to do. I don't want to come in and wholesale change things. We don't need to rip and replace every 3 years, but we do need to continuously be adapting and overcoming the challenges that we're facing to keep it simple for our partners.
Awesome. And Richard?
I think, I don't think there's enough focus on partner experience generally at firms. Companies will have customer experience reps, but they won't have partner experience reps. And, in many cases, the customer experience is actually defined by their experience with their partner. And so if their partner's mad at you, you can bet that they're not having a good experience, around your solution. So really understanding that that's the competitive landscape today. For the most part, admit that whether I sell this brand or this brand is probably not financially a huge difference, for me as a company. So how easy the technology is to work with, how simple the programs are, how connected I am to the people. It's like, do you want to go back to a restaurant that you have poor service at, even if they have great food? Probably not. I'd rather settle for a place that's maybe got a little less grandiose food, but just treats me like a king when I go to that restaurant. And that's where people are competing today.
Yeah, and even as the industry grows, I think that's still always going to be the case. And I think to your point, Rachel, the reason why I'm sure next year we could have the same panel is because there's never a last page in this book. There'll always be something we're learning, and next year Cosmo will have all kinds of new ideas and all that stuff, and that's what makes these things great. So I appreciate you. I mean, I learned a lot. Start, stop, continue. I'm writing that down. I'm keeping that. So that was a good point by Nick. So appreciate it. You guys are rock stars. Hopefully everybody got something out of this, and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me.
Ready?
All right. Thanks, guys.